Knockout, or Knockout.js as it's sometimes called, is an implementation of the view model design pattern specifically for use in our JavaScript applications. So because Knockout is a JavaScript library, we'd want to go ahead and use something like Bower to get a hold of it. So in this case, using Visual Studio 2015 and an ASP.NET 5 project, I've gone ahead and referenced the Knockout library and a specific version that I want to make use of there. Once I've done that, of course, I need to go ahead and reference the Knockout library inside of my application. In this case, it's an MVC application, and we're referencing jQuery as well. And once I've done that, I can go ahead and start using the capabilities of Knockout. Now, of course, we can't do an extensive review and details on the Knockout library itself, but let's have a look at a couple of features and some of how these can be used. So we're going to go ahead and have a set of data that we're going to go ahead and bind to a table. So I've got a T-head section here that will declare the actual column names, and then a T-body section, which doesn't actually have any content itself. All it does is it has a data bind attribute, which will go ahead and read a specific template and apply it to the actual set of data. The way I define a template, well, there's a few ways to do that in Knockout, but the way I'm doing that here is to go ahead and define a script element of type text HTML. So it won't execute, it's not actual JavaScript, for instance, but I give it an ID there and I go ahead and match that up. And then inside of this, I can have any HTML I like. So I've got a TR with various TDs inside as well, and various data bind attributes. So we'll go ahead and bind, for example, to the member name, the last login date of the members, and then particular level that the member belongs to, a good, a bad, or a medium member, and we'll write out the dues paid as well. Now, Knockout supports binding in order to be an MVVM implementation. So that means I can do binding of things like the value member to a text box, and similarly things like an options selection to a select box. But I may not want to go ahead and do update binding for things like a span, where I maybe only want to write the last login date and I want to allow the user to go ahead and override that. I can also do things like going ahead and calculating totals, for example, by binding to specific methods on the actual Knockout view model that we're looking at. So that's a quick look at the HTML. I can also bind things outside of the primary grid that I'm working with, for instance, like binding to particular method implementations for a button, or going ahead and tracking all of the changes as well. We'll come back to this a little bit later, but essentially what we're doing is we're outputting the view model and tracking it in real time, any changes that get made by way of the binding. And this is a simple preview of what that view model looks like if we were to go ahead and send it back to a backend server, for instance. In terms of the script, we'll go ahead and define the actual view model. So we'll set the different member levels that are available on there, and then we'll set the member of this particular view model, which is essentially the data that we're going to go ahead and bind to. And it's of type Knockout observable array, so it's an array that will get tracked as we modify, add, and remove members. We had a show totals due that we were binding to, which was a particular method implementation, which is also a computed Knockout observable value. So as the actual observable array changes, we'll see things changing in there as well. We have the ability to add a new member to that observable array, to go ahead and get the changes to track it over time as well. And that's a quick look at what we're going to do in this simple sample application for the actual Knockout site that we're going to look at. When I run the application, it's going to load the browser here, and I'm just going to jump over to the particular page that we're looking at. We can see the observable collection being bound there, so the actual HTML is binding to the details there, and I can go ahead and change the dues paid, for example, and see all of the updates occurring there as well. I can go ahead and add a new member, and I've done some binding on validation on the actual styling that we're going to apply there as well. So I've got a particular style that will apply if a particular validation isn't met. In this case, if the dues paid is 0 or below, dues haven't actually been paid for this member, then we'll automatically bind the row to a style of red there. But as soon as we go ahead and punch in a value, everything's fine there. And let's say, for example, that this person's name is Bob, and we can keep track of the overall underlying view model as well, bound live there too. So if I change another one of these elements, for instance, we can see everything occurring live, and we could go ahead and send the data from the view model back to the backend service, for example, to persist in a database. So that's a quick look at the Knockout library and how we can make use of it inside of our applications and inside of Visual Studio by getting the appropriate reference and then referencing it in our application. We've of course got to make sure to reference the script, so we can go ahead and bring that in with a script tag. If we use the source attribute, we'll actually even get some completion there to help us go ahead and traverse the project structure to go ahead and get access to the library directly.